Image welcome back Lincoln currency NE holding in your hand something so small, so common, that most people wouldn't think twice before tossing it into a change jar, a penny dish at the convenience store counter, or letting it slip between couch cushions without a second thought. And yet, within this tiny disc of metal lies an entire world of history, artistry, economics, and mystery, especially when we narrow our gaze to the 1986 Lincoln Memorial Cent, a coin that, for the vast majority of its kind, is worth exactly 1 cent, but for a few rare examples, could be worth thousands, and in the realm of legend and internet hype, has been rumored to be worth hundreds of millions, though the truth there is as fascinating as it is debatable. Let's begin at the very start, not just of this particular coin's life, but of its lineage, because to really understand the 1986 you need to know where it comes from, what design choices it carries forward, and what innovations and mishaps occurred during its production. The obverse of this penny, the front side, is dominated by the dignified right-facing profile of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, sculpted in 1909 by Victor David Brenner for the first Lincoln cent ever issued, a design that has endured for more than a century. Every detail of Lincoln's hair, the lines in his cheek, the bow tie beneath his chin, was carefully considered to create a strong yet approachable image of the man who guided the country through its greatest internal crisis. Above his head, the word liberty stands as both a political ideal and a standard element of American coinage, and to the right of his portrait, the date of issue, 1986, is stamped clearly, with a small d beneath it indicating the coin was minted in Denver, Colorado. The reverse of the coin is equally emblematic, the Lincoln Memorial, designed by Frank Gasparo, spread across the small circular field, each column standing in precise alignment, the central chamber housing the tiny engraved figure of Lincoln himself, visible between the pillars if you look closely enough, a miniature within a miniature, representing a statue within a building within a coin. Above the memorial arches the phrase United States of America, and just below it, the national motto E pluribus unum. Out of many one. An idea deeply embedded in the coin's symbolic purpose. Beneath the memorial, in bold letters, is the denomination, 1 cent, reminding everyone of its official monetary value. But there is more to this penny than design. By 1986, the Lincoln Memorial Cent had already undergone a major transformation in its composition. From its inception in 1959 until mid-1982, these coins were made of 95% copper, but rising copper prices pushed the U.S. Mint to switch to a core of 97.5% zinc with a thin plating of copper only 2.5% thick. This gave the coins a lighter weight, 2.50 grams instead of 3.11 grams, and made them cheaper to produce, but it also introduced new challenges in minting, such as susceptibility to corrosion when the copper layer wore away. The 1986 penny, therefore, is a copper-plated zinc coin with a diameter of 19.05 millimeters, a plain edge with no reading, and a feel that, while familiar, is slightly different from the heavy coppers of earlier decades. In terms of mintage, the Denver Mint was in full swing that year, producing billions of these coins, precisely 4,442,866,698 according to official records, which means that finding one in circulation today is anything but rare. In fact, you could probably gather a handful of them from loose change in a week if you made a point of looking. And yet, within that vast ocean of ordinary coins, there are a few rare fish, error coins, high-grade uncirculated examples, and perhaps even one-of-a-kind anomalies that command collector attention and high prices at auction. Some 1986 cents have been found with doubled dies, where elements of the design, such as the date, or the letters in Liberty, or I in God We Trust, appear slightly offset and doubled due to a misalignment during the die creation process. Others may have off-center strikes, where the design is not fully on the coin's surface, or die cracks, planchet flaws, or unusual toning that give them unique character. While most such errors only add a few dollars to the coin's value, a spectacularly preserved example graded MS69RD, meaning near perfect mint state with full original red luster, once sold for $7,840, showing just how far an otherwise common coin can rise in worth under the right circumstances. This gap between the penny's humble face value and its potential collector's value is what fuels so much fascination in the numismatic world. Stories circulate online about 1980 60 pennies being worth hundreds of thousands or even, in the most extreme and sensational claims, $651 million. In truth, there is no verified case of such a valuation, and the idea is almost certainly a mix of exaggeration, misunderstanding, and viral internet myth-making. But that doesn't stop the dream. After all, every collector has that fantasy of finding a life-changing rarity in their pocket change, and it's not entirely impossible. Other coins, like the 1943 brown cent or the 1955 double-die Lincoln cent, have been found in circulation decades after they were minted, and those have fetched huge sums at auction. So when you pick up a 1980 60 penny, you're not just holding a piece of metal, you're holding a lottery ticket of sorts, one with astronomical odds but no cost to play. The Denver Mint's operations in 1986 were a study in scale and precision, with automated presses churning out hundreds of coins per minute, each planchet fed into the dies with mechanical efficiency, each strike embedding Lincoln's likeness and the memorial in sharp relief. Quality control ensured that the vast majority met exacting standards, but in a process of billions, perfection is relative and tiny deviations inevitable. The result is a year's output that is 99.999% ordinary, with the remaining fraction holding the potential for collector interest. And the condition of the coin matters immensely. A circulated 1980 60 penny, even if it's an era coin, may be worth only a few dollars if it's heavily worn, while a pristine uncirculated example, especially one with full original red color and no visible flaws, can fetch far more. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC certify such coins, giving them an official grade on a 70-point scale, and it's at the top end of that scale where the big money changes hands. When we think about the history of the Lincoln cent, it is tempting to view the 1980 60 merely as one more date in an unbroken chain of production stretching from 1909 to the present day. But each year's coinage exists within the economic, political, and cultural moment of its time, and 1986 was no exception. The United States in the mid-1980s was experiencing a mix of economic growth, technological change, and shifting consumer habits. The penny itself was already under scrutiny. Inflation had long eroded its purchasing power, and there were debates in Congress and among economists about whether it even made sense to keep producing the 1-cent coin at all. Yet tradition, resistance to change, and the symbolic power of Lincoln's portrait kept it in production. The Denver Mint, one of the primary facilities producing America's coinage, stood as a monument to modern minting capabilities, with machinery capable of creating coins at speeds unimaginable in Brenner's day. The presses were loud, rhythmic, and relentless, and by the end of 1986, billions of gleaming copper-plated zinc cents had poured into the nation's banking system, ready to be spent, hoarded, or lost in the everyday churn of commerce. At the same time, the numismatic community was in a phase of growing sophistication. Coin grading services like Professional Coin Grading Service (PCGS), founded in 1986 itself, were just beginning to standardize how coins were evaluated and traded. For the first time, collectors could send their coins to an impartial third party to be authenticated and graded, creating a uniform language of quality that the market could trust. This development would later have a profound impact on the value of coins like the 1980 60 penny. An uncirculated coin with full red coloration and no visible flaws might have been admired and traded locally before, but now it could be slabbed in a tamper-proof holder with an official grade, giving it a level of market credibility that encouraged big money bidding at auctions. The result was a gradual redefinition of rarity, not just how many coins were made, but how many survived in pristine, untouched condition, and therein lies the key to understanding why some 1980 60 pennies are worth so much more than others. Out of the more than 4 billion struck that year in Denver, the vast majority entered circulation almost immediately. They rattled in cash registers, rubbed against other coins in pockets, slid across countless countertops, and took the knocks and scratches of everyday life. Each tiny mark, Each microscopic nick in the copper plating degraded its grade. Only a fraction escaped this fate, perhaps kept in a bank-wrapped roll, stashed away by someone saving a brand new batch from the bank, or placed in a collector's album before ever being handled. These survivors, especially when they have that fresh from the mint luster and zero contact marks, are the ones that can achieve astronomical grades like MS68 or MS69, where the difference in value between a near-perfect example and a flawless one is not just a matter of a few dollars, but potentially thousands. The psychology of coin collecting also plays a huge role in this phenomenon. Human beings are naturally drawn to the idea of perfection, and in the coin world, that perfection is quantified. The difference between an MS68RD and an MS69RD coin may be imperceptible to an untrained eye, yet to a serious collector chasing a complete registry set, the highest graded example of each date and mint mark, the jump is worth paying handsomely for. This competitive nature drives auction prices higher, especially when a coin is population 1 or population 2, meaning only 1 or 2 examples have been certified at that grade or higher. A 1980 60 penny in MS69RD is so scarce that when one appears at auction, it can ignite bidding wars, which in turn create headline-making prices that ripple through the collector community. But for every serious, well-documented sale, there are dozens of exaggerated claims circulating online, often in clickbait articles or social media posts. This is where the $651 million rumor comes into play. No reputable auction house, no professional grading service, and no verified private sale has ever recorded a 1980 60 penny selling for such a sum. The number likely originates from the combination of two elements: 1, the tendency of some online posts to attach outrageous values to common coins to generate clicks, and 2, the fact that large, record-breaking coin sales, like the 1933 St. Gaudens Double Eagle fetching over $18 million, are real and documented, giving casual readers a basis for believing other coins could also be worth extraordinary sums. Once such a figure gets attached to a coin, it spreads rapidly, because people love the idea that they might have an overlooked fortune sitting in their change jar. This psychological hook is so strong that it continues to pull in new readers, viewers, and hopeful searchers year after year. It is also worth noting that the 1980 60 penny exists in a transitional numismatic era. While the design had been stable since 1959, the production technology had evolved significantly. One change, implemented gradually during the mid-1980s, was the shift to a single-squeeze hubbing process for making dies. This was intended to reduce double die errors, yet it paradoxically introduced new varieties, including so-called trail dies, or wavy steps, on the Lincoln Memorial. These subtle variations are invisible to most people but can be highly desirable to error specialists. Another change was in the quality control of planchets, the blank metal discs that become coins. Zinc planchets plated with copper could occasionally develop blisters or plating flaws, leading to coins with unusual raised areas or missing copper spots. While most are dismissed as damaged coins, some extreme or dramatic examples are cataloged and traded among error enthusiasts. By digging into these technical details, one begins to see how a coin as common as the 1980 60 could have an almost infinite variety of collecting angles. Some focus on high-grade examples, others on errors, others on varieties, and still others on the broader historical context of why the coin looks and feels the way it does. Even the mint mark itself can be an area of study. Repunched mint marks, RPMs, where the D was stamped twice in slightly different positions during die preparation, have been documented for various years, and though rare for 1986, such a find would add another layer of collector interest. The market for these coins is shaped not just by rarity, but by timing. When a notable sale happens, such as a high-grade 1980 60 penny crossing the auction block for thousands, it often triggers a surge of interest, with people pulling their own 1980 60 pennies from storage and sending them in for grading. For a while, prices rise as demand outstrips supply, but eventually, the market cools as more examples surface. This cycle has repeated for countless coin types, but in the age of the internet, the peaks and valleys are amplified and sped up, creating short-lived frenzies that can make a coin's value chart look like a roller coaster, And yet, in spite of the cycles, the myths, and the sheer number of ordinary examples, there is something enduring about the appeal of the 1980 60 penny. It represents a convergence of old and new, the enduring face of Lincoln and the modern efficiency of high-speed minting, the ancient practice of collecting and the contemporary obsession with perfection, the grounded reality of 1 cent face value and the tantalizing fantasy of a multimillion-dollar windfall. All of these threads weave together into a narrative that keeps collectors and casual searchers alike turning over every penny they see, just in case the next one is special. The story of the 1980 60 penny is not just about design and rarity, it is also about economics, both in the macro sense of national production and in the micro sense of how much it costs to make a single cent. In 1986, the United States Mint operated under a mandate to produce enough coins to meet the needs of commerce, but also to do so at a cost that made fiscal sense. The change in composition from mostly copper to zinc-plated copper had been a crucial cost-saving measure just a few years earlier, and by 1986, it had already saved millions of dollars. At the time, the price of copper on the commodities market was high enough that a solid copper penny would have cost more to make than its face value, a situation that no mint can sustain for long without either raising production costs or altering the composition. Switching to a zinc core reduced material expenses significantly, allowing the mint to keep producing billions of 1-cent coins without incurring a loss on every unit. Yet this very change also subtly altered the character of the coin, creating differences in sound, weight, and durability that sharp-eyed collectors can recognize instantly. A pre-1982 copper penny dropped onto a table has a ringing tone, whereas a post-1982 zinc penny has a duller sound. The 1980 60, at 2.50 grams, is lighter than its copper predecessors, a difference you can measure on a small digital scale. For the seasoned collector, weight is one of the fastest diagnostic tools for separating the two compositions without looking at the date. The Denver Mint's role in producing these coins was part of a larger history dating back to 1906, when the facility first opened. By the mid-1980s, Denver was one of the most efficient coin-producing facilities in the world, turning out not only pennies but nickels, dimes, quarters, and half-dollars at incredible rates. Its location in the central United States gave it logistical advantages in distributing coins across the western states. The mint mark D on the 1980 60 penny is not just a letter, it is a symbol of the facility's contribution to the nation's coinage, and for collectors, it is a detail that can connect a coin in your hand to a specific place and moment in history. Each die used to strike these pennies was prepared with this mint mark, and tiny variations in how the mark was punched into the die can create varieties that specialists seek out. On some coins, the D appears slightly tilted, faint, or with doubling, all features that can elevate collector interest. When it comes to finding high-value examples, diagnostics are key. A collector looking to spot a valuable 1980 60 penny starts by examining the overall luster. Mint state coins retain a bright, reflective surface that catches the light evenly across the entire design. Any dark spots, dull areas, or changes in color can indicate wear, environmental damage, or handling. Next, the collector checks for contact marks, small dings or scratches caused by the coin bumping against others during storage or transport. On a high-grade coin, these will be minimal to non-existent. Magnification reveals further details: sharpness in Lincoln's hair, clarity in the lettering of Liberty and I in God We Trust, and complete, undisturbed lines on the Lincoln Memorial steps. For some varieties, the number of visible steps is a selling point. Fully defined steps without blending indicate a strong, well-executed strike. On the reverse, the tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial should be crisp and distinguishable. Any blurring in these fine details could indicate a weak strike, which, while interesting to some, generally lowers the grade and thus the value in standard collecting. Error hunting adds another layer of intrigue. The double die variety, where the coin's design appears doubled due to a misalignment during die creation, is perhaps the most famous type of mint error. A true doubled die will show doubling on the actual design elements, such as the date or letters, rather than a shadow or blur caused by a machine doubling during the strike. Another potential error is an off-center strike, where part of the design is missing because the blank planchet was not properly centered under the dies. The degree of off-center determines its appeal. Coins missing 5% of the design are less dramatic than those missing 50%, which can command much higher prices. There are also broad strikes, where the coin is struck without the collar that normally keeps it to size, resulting in a slightly larger and thinner coin, and these, too, can attract collectors when they are dramatic enough. Auction history provides concrete examples of how these factors come together to produce extraordinary value. The highest graded 1980 60 pennies, those rare MS-69 RD examples, have sold at major auction houses for thousands of dollars. One such coin, graded by PCGS, drew intense competition and ultimately hammered for $7,840, setting a benchmark for the date and mint mark. While this is far from the mythical $651 million figure, it is still remarkable for a coin that began life as a 1-cent piece. Other notable sales include coins with dramatic mint errors, such as a 1986 D struck on a dime planchet, or one struck with a misaligned die, both of which fetched hundreds to low thousands depending on the severity and visual appeal of the error. The error market is less predictable than the high-grade market because it depends heavily on the wow factor, how immediately obvious and striking the error is to anyone who sees it. In addition to auctions, the online marketplace has become a major venue for trading these coins. Sites like eBay feature listings for 1980 60 pennies at every price point, from a few cents for common circulated examples to hundreds of dollars for coins claimed to have rare errors. While some listings are legitimate, others are inflated by hopeful sellers banking on the viral nature of coin value rumors. This is why serious collectors emphasize authentication and grading. A coin in a slab from a respected grading company removes much of the guesswork and provides assurance that the coin is what the seller claims it to be. It also allows buyers to compare directly with past sales of similarly graded coins, making the market more transparent. And yet, even with all this structure, the romance of the hunt remains. There is something deeply satisfying about pulling a shiny 1980 60 penny from change, knowing that you have just found a tiny relic from the mid-1980s, a piece of a massive mintage that still somehow feels personal when it's in your hand. The fact that most are worth only a cent does not diminish the thrill of looking for the rare outliers, those coins that stand apart because of their condition, their errors, or their unique place in minting history. For every collector who has ever discovered a valuable coin in a pile of ordinary change, the experience is a reminder that treasures can be hidden in plain sight. The Denver Mint in 1986 was a marvel of precision engineering and industrial scale, but it was not infallible. When you are striking more than 4 billion pennies in a single year, even the tiniest variations in pressure, temperature, die wear, or planchet preparation can create minute differences from coin to coin. Most of these variations are invisible to the naked eye and fall well within the mint's tolerances, but for collectors, they are opportunities. For instance, over time a working die begins to lose its sharpness, the tiny recesses that form the details of Lincoln's hair or the steps of the memorial gradually softening under the immense pressure of repeated strikes. Coins made from a fresh die can have razor-sharp detail, while those made from a worn die might appear slightly mushy. To the average spender, this difference is meaningless. To the numismatist, it can be a clue about where in the production run a coin came from. Some collectors even seek out late die state coins that show cracks, cuds, raised lumps from die breakage, or other signs of the die's final days, as these errors can make the coin more desirable. Another quirk comes from the copper plating process. Because the zinc core is softer and more reactive than copper, any imperfection in the plating can lead to blistering, peeling, or spotting. While the mint considers such issues defects, they are often the result of tiny bits of contamination or uneven coverage during the plating bath. These can produce coins with unusual raised bubbles, streaks, or missing patches of copper that reveal the silvery zinc beneath. Some collectors view these as damage and avoid them. Others see them as unique and interesting, especially when the effect is large or oddly shaped. In rare cases, the plating defect is so dramatic that it becomes a talking point and can fetch more than face value. Culturally, the 1980-60 penny sits in a period of American history that was both modern and transitional. Ronald Reagan was president, the Cold War was entering its final years, the Challenger disaster had stunned the nation in January of that year, and technology was beginning to seep into everyday life in ways that would soon explode into the digital age. Pennies minted in 1986 entered circulation in a society that still used cash heavily for daily transactions, yet was slowly adopting credit cards and beginning to experiment with early forms of electronic payment. This meant that a penny in 1986 had more opportunities to change hands in a single day than a penny today, simply because people handled physical coins more often. That heavy circulation is one reason why finding a high-grade 1986 D today is more challenging than it might seem despite the massive mintage. Comparing the 1986 D to other Lincoln Memorial cents helps to put its rarity in context. Take, for example, the 1970s small date cent or the 1969's double dia verse. Both of these are famous key dates within the Memorial series, with known populations far smaller than the billions of 1986 DS. Or look at the 1983 double die reverse, where the words 1 cent and e pluribus unum appear clearly doubled. That variety commands strong prices because of its distinctiveness and relative scarcity. The 1986 D doesn't have a marquee variety like that in large numbers, but it does have its share of smaller, subtler varieties and high-grade rarities that give it collector interest. The absence of a widely publicized, super variety, means that its market value is more dependent on condition and error types than on a single dramatic design anomaly. And yet, in online conversations and viral posts, the 1986 D penny keeps surfacing as a supposed multimillion-dollar treasure. The persistence of the $651 million myth is a fascinating study in how information spreads and mutates. One possible origin is the misinterpretation of auction listings, where a coin's lot number or bid increments are mistaken for the final sale price. Another is deliberate exaggeration by content creators seeking to capitalize on the dream of hidden wealth, an easy hook for videos, articles, and social media posts that promise to reveal the 1 penny worth millions. Once such a claim is made, it's picked up by others, stripped of context, and repeated until it takes on the appearance of truth, especially to audiences who may not be familiar with numismatics. The figure of $651 million is so extreme that it catches the eye immediately, and in an age of scrolling feeds, the number alone can be enough to make people click, watch, and share. This myth endures because it offers a story that is simple, emotional, and hopeful. In that story, anyone, no matter their background, education, or wealth, might stumble upon a life-changing fortune in the form of an ordinary coin. It's a narrative that fits perfectly with the broader human fascination with treasure hunting, whether it's gold prospecting, metal detecting, or combing through thrift stores for hidden gems. The reality, of course, is more nuanced. Finding a truly valuable 1986 D penny requires knowledge, patience, and often a bit of luck, and even the highest verified sales are measured in thousands, not millions. But the myth fuels curiosity, and curiosity brings more people into the hobby, which in turn keeps interest in coins alive. From a storytelling perspective, the myth is also a powerful entry point into teaching about real coin values. A content creator might start with the hook of the $651 million penny, and then walk viewers through what actually makes a coin valuable: rarity, condition, demand, and historical significance. In doing so, the legend of the 1986 D becomes a kind of gateway into a deeper appreciation of numismatics. That's why, even though serious collectors may roll their eyes at the inflated claims, they also recognize that such stories have a role to play in keeping the public engaged. What makes the 1986 D particularly suited to this role is its combination of familiarity and hidden complexity. It is a coin almost everyone has seen and handled, yet within its billions there are specimens that, through sheer preservation, minting quirks, or outright errors, rise far above the crowd. That blend of the everyday and the extraordinary is what gives it enduring appeal, both in truth and in myth. When a collector sets out to find a high-value 1986 D penny, the first thing they need to understand is that success begins with the eyes and ends with the details. Every coin tells a story in its surface, its shine, and its imperfections. The diagnostic process is part science, part art, and it demands both patience and precision. Imagine you're sitting at a table with a stack of 1980 pennies freshly pulled from a bank roll. The first step is sorting by eye under normal light, removing anything with obvious wear, scratches, or discoloration. Circulated coins with dull, flat surfaces will rarely make the cut for high-grade consideration, so they go into the spend pile. The coins that remain are your candidates, but this is where the real work begins. Under magnification, typically 5x to 10x for most collectors, though specialists may go higher, you start looking for luster breaks. Luster is the cartwheel-like reflection that rolls across the surface of a mint-state coin when tilted under light. Any interruption in this flow, such as a dull patch or scratch, is a sign of wear or contact marks. On a high-grade 1980 the luster will be uninterrupted, flowing smoothly across Lincoln's cheek, the bow tie, and the fields, the flat areas of the coin. Contact marks are next. These small nicks often occur on high points like Lincoln's jaw or the steps of the memorial. The fewer and smaller these marks, the higher the potential grade. Once you've determined the coin's surface is clean, the next step is strike quality. A sharp strike is one where every detail is rendered crisply. On the obverse, this means clear separation between strands of Lincoln's hair, a fully defined bow tie, and sharp edges on the lettering. On the reverse, the steps of the memorial should be distinct, with no blending between them, and the tiny figure of Lincoln should be visible between the columns. Weak strikes can occur when the dies are slightly misaligned or worn, and while they can still be mint state, they often don't command top prices because collectors prefer coins that showcase the design at its best. Variety hunting is a whole discipline within this process. The most famous variety type is the doubled die. On a 1980 a doubled die might show as doubling on the date, on Liberty, or in the motto "I in God We Trust." This is not machine doubling, which looks flat and shelf-like. A true doubled die has rounded, raised edges on the doubled parts, a sign that the doubling is in the die itself. Another sought-after variety is the repunched mint mark (RPM), where the D has been punched more than once in slightly different positions during die preparation. This can create a shadowed or overlapping effect that is visible even without magnification on some examples. Error coins expand the possibilities. Off-center strikes, broad strikes, die cracks, and clipped planchets all add unique character. A dramatic off-center strike showing 50% of the design missing can be worth hundreds of dollars, especially if the date and mint mark are still visible. Auction records provide real-world benchmarks for these diagnostics. In one notable sale, a 1980 penny-graded MS69RD by PCGS, population 1 at the time, brought in $7,840 at auction. This was not because it had a rare variety or error, but simply because it was the finest known example in existence, a perfect storm of flawless surfaces, blazing red luster, and a razor-sharp strike. Other sales in the $1,000 to $3,000 range have occurred for MS68 RD coins, though as more high-grade coins are discovered and submitted for grading, the population increases, and prices can adjust downward. Error coins have their own market dynamics. A 1980 struck on a dime planchet, for instance, sold for over $500 due to its novelty and rarity, while a dramatic broad strike fetched over $300.1 factor that many beginners overlook is eye appeal. Even within the same grade, some coins are simply more attractive than others. A coin with vibrant, even color, strong luster, and no distracting spots will always draw stronger bids than one with the same technical grade but dull color or uneven toning. Eye appeal is subjective, but it often becomes the deciding factor when two collectors are competing for the same coin at auction. For the 1980, which exists in such vast numbers, exceptional eye appeal can be the difference between a modest sale and a standout price. In telling this story for your audience, it's important to draw them into the physicality of the coin. Describe the sensation of holding a freshly minted penny, the sharp edges, the cool metal warming in the hand, the faint smell of copper plating. Explain how under a loupe, Lincoln's profile is not just an image but a miniature sculpture, each hair and fold of cloth rendered in fine relief. When you tilt the coin, the luster dances across the surface like sunlight on water, and in that moment, you understand why collectors obsess over such details. The fact that billions were made only adds to the drama, because in a sea of sameness, it is the rare outlier that becomes a treasure. And yet, no matter how far you dive into diagnostics and auction results, the legend of the $651 million penny hovers over the conversation like a mirage. Viewers will inevitably ask about it, so this is where you can walk them through the reality with both clarity and flair. That figure, you can explain, has no basis in any recorded sale, no documentation from any credible source. It's a product of the internet's ability to amplify and distort, often seeded by content creators chasing clicks. But that doesn't mean valuable 1980-60 pennies don't exist. They do, and they are worth seeking out. The difference is that their real value lies in the hundreds or thousands, not the hundreds of millions. This truth doesn't make the hunt any less exciting. In fact, it grounds it in a real challenge that rewards skill and knowledge rather than pure luck. In the grander scheme, the 1980-60 penny is a perfect teaching tool for the principles of numismatics. It's common enough that anyone can participate in the search, yet nuanced enough to reward expertise. It shows how condition, rarity, demand, and market timing intersect to create value. And it illustrates how myths can grow from grains of truth, feeding the imagination and drawing people into a deeper exploration of history, art, and economics through something as simple as a coin. The 1980-60 penny is not just a coin, it is a time capsule from a decade defined by contrasts. On one hand, the 1980s were an era of excess, with booming consumer culture, larger-than-life political personalities, and technological leaps that promised a bright future. On the other hand, they were marked by geopolitical tension, economic restructuring, and a shifting sense of identity in America. The penny minted in Denver that year entered this complex ecosystem of human life, passing silently from hand to hand as the soundtrack of top 40 radio played in malls, as VHS tapes rewound in living rooms, and as arcade cabinets devoured quarters in dimly lit game rooms. It may seem odd to think of a small copper-plated zinc disc as a participant in history, but every transaction it took part in, buying a piece of gum, paying exact change at a bus fare box, being dropped into a donation jar, was part of the daily choreography of the nation. The Denver Mint itself, in 1986, was operating at staggering capacity. It wasn't just producing pennies, but also nickels, dimes, quarters, and half dollars, along with coinage for foreign nations. Its presses clanged and roared in unison, striking thousands of coins per minute, each blank disc traveling through a carefully choreographed sequence, punched from zinc strip, copper-plated, washed, dried, fed into the coining press, struck between obverse and reverse dies, and finally counted and bagged. The sheer volume of pennies meant that quality control had to be both automated and incredibly efficient. Sensors, cameras, and human inspectors worked in tandem, yet no system is perfect, hence the small number of error coins that slip into circulation, which today form the backbone of the hunt for rarities. Globally, the Lincoln cent is an icon, even outside the United States. Collectors in Canada, Europe, Asia, and Latin America seek out U.S. coins for their historical continuity and recognizable designs. The Lincoln Memorial Reverse, used from 1959 to 2008, has a fan base among international collectors precisely because it represents an era of American coinage that is now over. The 1980-60, while not inherently rare on the global stage, becomes more interesting in markets where U.S. mint errors are scarce, or where high-grade coins are harder to source due to the local climate causing rapid toning and corrosion. A pristine red 1980-60 in an international auction can sometimes bring stronger prices than expected, not because of domestic scarcity, but because of the difficulty of importing such coins without flaws. Psychologically, the appeal of coins like the 1980-60, especially when tied to myths of massive value, taps into deep human instincts. One is the hidden treasure archetype, a narrative as old as civilization. The idea that something ordinary could secretly be extraordinary invites people to look more closely, to question appearances, to believe that luck and fate might smile upon them. Another is the appeal of mastery, the notion that with enough knowledge, one can discern subtle truths invisible to the untrained eye. For the seasoned numismatist, this mastery is real. Spotting a doubled die or identifying an unusually well-struck example is a skill honed over years. For the newcomer drawn in by the $651 million claim, the journey from casual curiosity to informed collector is a transformation fueled by that initial spark. There's also the element of democratization in coin collecting. Unlike fine art or rare wine, which often requires significant wealth to enter meaningfully, coins can be found in change, in jars, in pocket lint. The 1986 D is especially emblematic of this accessibility. It is both everywhere and, in its finest forms, elusive. This makes it the perfect bridge between casual collecting and serious numismatics. Someone might start by setting aside every shiny 1986 D they find, then learn to grade coins, then invest in a loop, then start attending coin shows. Before long, they might be submitting coins to professional grading services, chasing MS68RD examples, and joining online forums to trade and learn. In this way, the coin becomes not just a collectible, but a teacher and a doorway into a lifelong pursuit. From a market perspective, the 1986 DS story is one of stability with pockets of excitement. Common circulated examples remain worth a cent, and will likely do so indefinitely, given the massive mintage. But the upper end of the market, those flawless or nearly flawless examples, will always have competition among registry set collectors who want the finest known for their series. Add in the occasional headline-grabbing auction for a top pop coin or a dramatic mint error, and the 1986 D continues to make appearances in collector news. The myth of the $651 million penny, while factually baseless, ironically helps keep the market for high-grade 1986 DS healthy by continually introducing new people to the idea that this coin might be special. The 1986 D also invites a broader conversation about the fate of the penny itself. Debates about whether to retire the cent have been ongoing for years, driven by rising production costs and questions about its utility in an increasingly cashless society. If the U.S. were ever to stop minting pennies, the entire Lincoln Cent series, especially late memorial designs like the 1986 D, would take on new significance as part of a closed chapter in coinage history. That possibility adds another layer of potential future value, not in the hundreds of millions, but in the steady upward appreciation that often follows the end of a long-running design series. When you weave all of this together for your audience, the 1986 D emerges as more than a random date in the Lincoln Memorial Cent series. It becomes a symbol of the 1980s, a product of industrial precision and human fallibility, a global ambassador of American coinage, a trigger for deep-seated treasure-hunting instincts, and a quiet witness to the debates about the penny's future. It is a coin that has traveled through the hands of millions, perhaps billions, yet still holds secrets for those patient enough to look closely. In the cool metallic air of the Denver Mint, the year is 1986 and the clanging of presses echoes like thunder through vast factory halls. Rows of blank zinc discs, each soon to be copper-plated, slide down polished steel chutes in endless streams. Machines hiss, whir, and strike with the force of contained lightning. Inside a hopper, our penny, at this point nothing more than a raw disc, waits for its turn. A blast of mechanical energy strikes it between two engraved dies, one bearing Abraham Lincoln's dignified profile, the other the stately Lincoln Memorial. In that instant, the disc becomes a coin, transformed forever into a piece of U.S. currency. It gleams with a perfect copper-red luster, still warm from the pressure and friction of the strike. It is flawless, no scratches, no nicks, no discoloration, a perfect newborn in the vast family of billions. From here, it tumbles into a bin with thousands of siblings. The sound is like rainfall made of metal, bright, sharp, constant. The bin is weighed, sealed, and shipped to the Federal Reserve's distribution network. Our coin's journey begins, but it does not know yet whether it will be spent into the economy immediately, tucked away in a collection, or lost in a drawer for decades. For days, it sits in a heavy cloth bag on a pallet, surrounded by the hum of forklifts and the distant chatter of warehouse workers. Finally, it is loaded into an armored truck bound for a regional bank. At the bank, the penny is counted again and rolled into a paper tube with 49 others. It is packed with more rolls into a cardboard box, each corner worn from handling. The box is sent to a local grocery store. It is there, in the hands of a cashier on a quiet Tuesday morning, that our penny first enters the human economy. A customer buys a pack of gum for 35 cents and pays with a dollar bill. The cashier counts out 65 cents in change, 2 quarters, a dime, and our penny. For the first time, the coin feels the warmth of human skin, the faint imprint of fingerprints on its still bright surface. Over the next few months, the penny changes hands hundreds of times. It rides in pockets, rests in cash registers, slides across diner counters, and clinks against other coins and glass jars. It buys candy, pays bus fare, and completes countless small transactions that no one remembers but that make up the invisible fabric of daily life. As it moves, it collects tiny nicks and faint scratches, contact marks from its fellow coins. Its luster begins to fade in spots, but it remains bright enough to catch the eye. Then, one day in 1987, it lands in the pocket of a young boy who has just started collecting coins. He dumps his change onto his bedspread, sorting through it for anything unusual. The penny catches his attention, not because it is rare, but because it looks newer than the rest. He tosses it into a small cardboard box where he keeps shiny ones. There it will stay for years, protected from the worst wear of circulation. By the mid-1990s, the boy is a teenager, less interested in coins and more in music and friends. The box is shoved into the back of a desk drawer. Our penny spends the next decade in darkness, untouched, while the world outside changes. Computers become household staples, cell phones shrink, the internet explodes into everyday life. Dust settles on the box, but the coin inside remains almost exactly as it was when first struck. In the early 2000s, the now grown man moves to a new city. Cleaning out his old room, he finds the box and opens it. Most of the coins inside are tarnished from age, but our penny, still only lightly circulated, glows with a hint of its original red. He considers keeping it but decides instead to deposit all the coins at his bank. Once again, the penny enters circulation. Now it travels faster, changing hands in coffee shops, vending machines, and parking meters. It passes through dozens of wallets and cash drawers, its surface acquiring the patina of age. Years later, in the early 2020s, the penny lands in the change jar of a retired man who enjoys roll hunting, sorting through bank rolls in search of treasures. On a rainy afternoon, he sits at his kitchen table with a magnifying glass, opening roll after roll of pennies. When he spots the 1986 D, his eyes linger. It is in remarkably good condition for its age, minimal wear, strong luster, full detail in Lincoln's hair, and a sharp strike. He examines it under his loupe, looking for varieties. No doubled die, no repunched mint mark, but still, the condition impresses him. He sets it aside. Later, he decides to send it to a professional grading service. Weeks pass before the coin comes back encapsulated in a clear plastic holder, labeled MS68RD, one of the highest grades possible for this date. The retired man knows what this means. A coin like this is rare, with perhaps only a handful known at this grade. He lists it in an online auction, where collectors from across the country bid fiercely. The final hammer price is over $3,000, not $651 million, not the mythical number the internet whispers about, but enough to make the discovery memorable and satisfying. From its birth in the Denver Mint to its decades of quiet service in the economy, to its rediscovery and recognition as a rare survivor, our penny's journey reflects the hidden drama in even the smallest objects. Most 1986 pennies will never see such a fate. They will wear down, corrode, and disappear from circulation without fanfare. But for the few that remain in extraordinary condition, the story is one of endurance, of chance, and of the human desire to find value and meaning in the overlooked. And perhaps that is the real magic of the 1986 penny, not the fantasy of an unimaginable price tag, but the truth that something so small, so common, can carry a story across decades and still have the power to surprise. When a collector or grader examines a 1980 60 penny under strong magnification, the first thing they notice is the texture of the fields, the flat areas around Lincoln's portrait on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. On a fresh strike, these fields are smooth, reflective, and exhibit a uniform copper sheen, the result of meticulous planchet preparation before striking. Each blank planchet in 1986 began as a zinc core, plated with pure copper to a thickness of approximately 8 microns. That plating was achieved via electrochemical deposition, and the success of that process determined how even and uniform the coin's surface would be. In high-grade survivors, the plating is flawless. No bubbles, no streaks, no exposed zinc. Under magnification, the copper grain structure appears tightly packed, without the crystalline texture that comes from environmental exposure. On the obverse, Lincoln's portrait remains one of the most recognizable features in all of U.S. coinage. In 1986, the Denver Mint used obverse dies with sharp hub details in the hair curls above the ear, the bow tie folds beneath the chin, and the fine contouring of the cheekbone. These are the first areas to show weakness in strikes or wear in circulation. A fully struck 1980 60 will show separation in every hair strand, crisp lines in the bow tie, and no flattening of the jawline. On worn coins, the hair merges into smooth, indistinct masses, the bow tie loses definition, and Lincoln's cheek flattens. The inscriptions on the obverse, Liberty to the left, the date and mint mark to the right, also reveal much to the trained eye. The D mint mark in 1986 is small and sharply formed, with squared corners inside the loop. Collectors sometimes hunt for repunched mint marks, RPMs, where a mint mark punch was struck more than once in slightly different positions. While 1986 D RPMs are not common, some minor examples do exist, visible under magnification as shadow-like doubling or split serifs. The reverse is equally rich in detail. The Lincoln Memorial engraving is a study in microsymmetry. There are 12 visible columns on the front facade, with the statue of Lincoln faintly visible between the central two. A strong strike shows the statue's silhouette clearly, as well as the separation between each column and the fine steps leading up to the building. The word 1 cent arcs boldly above the memorial, while United States of America stretches across the top rim, and E pluribus unum is tucked in just below. Weak strikes can cause the steps to blur together or the inner columns to appear mushy. Graders look closely at the tops of the letters in 1 cent and United States of America for signs of strike weakness or post-mint damage. Then there are die markers, tiny, unique fingerprints left by the individual dies that struck the coin. These can include die scratches, fine raised lines from polishing the die chips, small lumps of extra metal from cracks or breaks in the die, or die cracks, thin raised lines running across the coin where the die itself fractured slightly. On 1980 60 pennies, certain dies are known to have small chips in the memorial steps or cracks extending from the rim into the lettering. Advanced collectors catalog these markers, using them to identify coins struck from the same die pair. This kind of detective work adds another layer of collectability. Even a common date penny can become valuable if it has a distinctive and popular die variety. The coin's composition also plays a crucial role in its survival. Since mid-1982, all Lincoln cents have been made from a copper-plated zinc planchet, weighing exactly 2.50 grams. This composition is more prone to corrosion than the older 95% copper cents, because once the thin copper layer is breached, the zinc core reacts quickly with moisture and chemicals in the environment. This is why so many modern pennies, especially those from circulation, develop zinc rot, visible as pitting, bubbling, or dark spots. A pristine 1980 60 without any signs of corrosion is therefore far more desirable and much rarer than its mintage numbers suggest. The difference between a 1 cent common coin and a multi-$100 gem can be as simple as whether that plating survived intact. Under angled light, luster is another critical grading factor. Freshly struck pennies display a cartwheel effect, bands of light that roll across the surface as the coin is tilted. This effect comes from microscopic flow lines in the metal, created as the planchet metal is forced outward during the strike. The sharper and more complete the cartwheel, the higher the coin's grade is likely to be. A dull or broken cartwheel indicates wear or heavy handling, even if the coin looks shiny at first glance. Environmental toning also plays into value. Some 1986 DS develop an attractive reddish gold hue or even rainbow tones from years of careful storage. This can happen naturally when coins are stored in original mint packaging or certain coin albums. Artificial toning, however, is a different matter entirely. Grading services are adept at spotting it, and artificially toned coins will be rejected or labeled as questionable color, which reduces market value dramatically. Long-term preservation of copper-plated zinc cents is an art in itself. High-grade 1980 pennies are often stored in inert plastic holders, away from humidity and temperature fluctuations. Collectors avoid PVC-containing flips, as these can leach chemicals that damage the copper over time. Even handling must be done with cotton gloves or by the edges only, as the natural oils and skin can leave permanent marks. For error specialists, the 1980 offers a playground of possibilities. Off-center strikes, broad strikes, where the collar fails and the coin spreads outward, cap dies, and double strikes have all been recorded. Some of these errors can be spectacular, with dramatic visual appeal, and can command prices far beyond a normal high-grade example. While the average collector may never encounter such an error in change, the possibility keeps roll hunters opening one paper wrapper after another, scanning for something extraordinary. In the world of registry set competition, where collectors vie to own the finest certified examples of each date and mint, the 1980 becomes a fierce battleground. A population report from a grading service might show only a handful of coins at MS68 RD, and perhaps none finer. When one of these comes to market, deep-pocketed bidders push prices into the thousands, not because the date is rare overall, but because that specific level of perfection is so elusive. Thus, when you hold a 1980 penny and look at it closely, really closely, you are looking at a combination of art, engineering, and industrial history on a microscopic scale. Every groove in Lincoln's hair, every ripple of the memorial steps, every subtle shimmer of copper is a record of how the coin was made, how it lived, and how it survived. For the untrained eye, it's just a cent. For those who know what to look for, it's an entire world pressed into 19 millimeters of metal. There's a number floating around the internet, a number so big, so ridiculous, that it grabs people by the throat and doesn't let go. $651 million for a penny. Not just any penny, but a 1980. On forums, social media posts, and clickbait YouTube thumbnails, the number glows in bold red letters next to a zoomed-in photo of Lincoln's face. And here's the thing, this kind of headline works. People see it, they think, wait, I might have one of those in my junk drawer. And they click. That's human nature. But the truth? The truth is not nearly as flashy, and yet, once you understand it, it's far more interesting. To understand why the $651 million claim is nonsense, you have to first understand how coin prices are determined. In the real numismatic market, no amount of wishing can turn a common coin into a record-shattering treasure. There are three big factors that actually matter: rarity, condition, and demand. A coin has to score extremely high in at least two of those categories to command an astronomical price. Let's start with rarity. The 1980 penny is not rare in the traditional sense. In fact, the Denver Mint produced a staggering 4,442,866,698 of them. That's over 4 billion, enough for every single person in the United States to have more than a dozen each. This is not like the 1943 copper cent, where only a handful were struck by accident. This is mass production on a colossal scale. That means that in circulated grades, the kind you find in change, they are worth exactly 1 cent, because rarity simply isn't there. So how could a 1980 be worth anything more? That's where condition comes in. Coins are graded on a scale from 1 to 70, with 70 representing a perfect, flawless example. For modern coins, anything graded MS68 or higher is extremely difficult to find because of how coins are handled during and after minting. Even straight from the bank in 1986, coins were dumped into bags, rolled by machines, and shipped in bulk. That means they picked up tiny contact marks that kept them from perfect grades. A 1980 60 and MS-68 red, meaning full original red color with no toning, might be one of only a handful known. That makes it rare in condition, not mintage. And in numismatics, rarity of condition can drive prices up dramatically. Now, the third factor, demand, is the fuel that makes the other two factors matter. There could be a coin that's extremely rare and in perfect condition, but if nobody cares about it, it will never sell for much. The 1980 60 penny benefits from a steady baseline of demand from Lincoln cent collectors, registry set competitors, and era variety hunters. When an MS-68 example hits the market, those people compete, and that competition drives the price. But let's be clear, that price is in the thousands, maybe tens of thousands for an absolutely spectacular example, not hundreds of millions. So where does the $651 million number even come from? Often, it's the result of deliberate misinformation to drive clicks and views. Sometimes a coin gets listed on eBay for a ridiculous asking price, not because the seller expects to sell it, but because they hope to attract attention. Unsuspecting viewers see the listing, assume it's legitimate, and the myth snowballs. Other times, articles and videos simply make things up, because $3,000 penny doesn't have the same viral pull as $651 million penny. The number becomes a meme, divorced entirely from reality. Let's put this in perspective. The most expensive coin ever sold is the 1933 St. Gaudens Double Eagle, which went for $18.9 million in 2021. That's a US gold coin with immense historical significance, extreme rarity, and a story that involves presidential orders, the Great Depression, and decades of mystery. The idea that a modern copper-plated zinc cent, of which billions were made, would sell for over 30 times that record is beyond implausible. If such a sale ever happened, it would be front-page news worldwide, and every numismatic publication would devote entire issues to the event. That hasn't happened because it hasn't, and can't, happen. Another important point is that coin values are not fixed like the price of gasoline. They fluctuate based on auction results, market trends, and collector interest. If two registry set competitors are locked in a battle to own the top-rated 1980 60, they might bid the price up for that one auction, but once the dust settles, the market adjusts. That's why serious collectors rely on recent auction records from reputable houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, or Great Collections, not random internet claims. And there's another layer to this: grading fees and economics. Sending a penny to a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC costs money, usually more than the coin is worth unless it's in exceptional condition. If the average person pulls a 1980 60 out of change, it's almost certainly circulated and worth a cent. If it looks perfect, it still has to survive close inspection for tiny flaws before it has a shot at a top grade. Out of the billions minted, maybe a few dozen have the potential to break into the MS-68 plus range. And even then, the highest auction prices for these aren't anywhere near mythical millions, let alone hundreds of millions. So why keep chasing these coins at all? Because the real thrill isn't in stumbling on an internet hoax jackpot, it's in finding that one coin in 1,000, in a roll from the bank, that glows with perfect luster, no spots, no nicks, and razor-sharp detail. It's in learning the differences between grades, recognizing die varieties, and building a set that represents the very best examples of each year and mint. That's the kind of treasure that lasts, because it's built on skill and knowledge, not clickbait dreams. And maybe that's the final lesson here. In the age of viral misinformation, the most valuable currency you can have isn't a $651 million penny. It's the ability to tell the difference between fantasy and fact. When you can see past the hype, you start to appreciate coins for what they really are: tiny, tangible pieces of history, each with its own journey, its own survival story, and yes, its own value, but measured in the real world, not the world of internet myth-making. It begins the way it so often does, not with a spotlight or an auction gavel, but with a cardboard box. A box full of bank rolls, heavy enough to make your wrist ache after carrying it from the teller's window. 50 rolls, 50 cents each, 25 pennies per roll. That's 1,250 chances at finding something extraordinary, all wrapped in thin brown paper and crimped at the ends like little time capsules. The first roll opens with the dry pop of paper tearing. Copper tones flash in the light, but they're mostly the dulled, mellow shades of circulation, scratches, spots, years of pocket wear. Still, the rhythm of searching takes over. Coin after coin spins between gloved fingers, date flashing under the desk lamp, reverse checked in a heartbeat. Then the first 1980-60 appears, and instinct kicks in. It's common, yes, but it still goes under the loupe. The luster is patchy, a faint thumbprint mars the obverse. Not a candidate. Into the discard pile it goes. Roll after roll, the process becomes hypnotic. Fingers learn to feel the difference between a copper 1981 and a copper-plated zinc 1986 before the date is even visible. The sound changes too. Older copper scents ring sharper when they tap together, while zinc has a duller click. A second 1980-60 surfaces, this one with sharp detail, but a faint carbon spot on the memorial's roof ruins its chance at perfection. Into the box it drops. Halfway through the box, there's fatigue in the shoulders, but also a strange momentum. Searching is part labor, part meditation, and part hope. The best finds often come when you're not expecting them. And then it happens. A coin slides from the paper and lands in your palm, and for a moment, everything stops. It's a 1980-60, yes, but it's different. The copper is bright, glowing like it just left the press. No dullness, no hazing. Under the loupe, Lincoln's cheek is flawless, the bow tie crisp, the hair curls fully separated. The fields around him are smooth and reflective, with only the faintest trace of the microscopic flow lines that give luster its rolling cartwheel effect. You tilt it under the light, and the cartwheel spins in perfect bands across the surface. No spots. No nicks. No signs of a weak strike. On the reverse, every column of the memorial is cleanly defined, the statue of Lincoln sharp in silhouette. The steps have full separation, even at the center. It's a coin that makes you think, this one could be it. That night, the coin goes into a 2x2 holder, labeled and set aside. No fingerprints, no risks. The next morning, it's sent off to a grading service. Weeks pass. You almost forget about it, until the email arrives. The grade is MS68RD. Red. Flawless color. A top-tier survivor. And now comes the final act. Coins like this don't just sell in casual swaps. They need the stage of an auction, the energy of competition. Heritage Auctions lists it, and the bidding begins. 2 registry-set competitors, both sitting on near-perfect collections, both missing this exact coin in this exact grade, lock horns. The price rises in steady increments. Hundreds. Thousands. The room starts to hum. 3,000. 4. 5. Finally, the gavel comes down at $8,400. Not $651 million. Not a viral myth. But a real number, backed by real demand, for a coin you pulled from a roll that cost 50 cents. And in that moment, you realize something. The magic wasn't just in the money, it was in the chase. In the hours of searching, the patience, the disappointment, the sudden spark of finding something rare where billions of others looked the same. That's the truth that the viral headlines miss. You don't have to find a 1 in a billion, history-breaking treasure to feel the thrill of collecting. You just have to find one coin that tells you, quietly but clearly, I'm worth keeping. The box of rolls is gone now, but the hunt isn't over. Somewhere out there, in a bank vault or a dresser drawer, another flawless 1986D is waiting. Maybe you'll find it next month, maybe next year. And when you do, it will start the whole story over again. That's the real worth of the 1980-60 penny, not in mythical millions, but in the unshakable pull of the search, the learning, and the joy of holding history in your hand, 1 cent at a time.